The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And Eason have a rich heritage of book selling since 1886. It's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. So stay listening for Ryan Recommends, of course, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. And make sure to browse your local Eason store for your next book, or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Whether you're after the latest bestseller, a hidden gem, or a classic read, Eason has you covered. Eason, be inspired. Today on The Bookshelf, we are joined by Dr. Sumi Dunne. She's known for, we could say, her warmth and indeed her practical advice on the TV show Operation Transformation. We'll get to that a little later on. But today, we are swapping the medical charts for chapters as we explore the books that shaped Sumi's life. The childhood favourite, the book that brought her joy, the book that changed her life, and of course, the name of the autobiography she has yet to write. So let's welcome to The Bookshelf, Dr. Sumi Dunne.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. And you're somebody I know because I loved the TV show Operation Transformation. God knows why, but I just did. Given my, but anyway, we'll come.
Absolutely,
we'll get to all of that.
Yeah.
But so I've met you in passing here and there, and you know people who I know people because it's Ireland. But it's really lovely to see you in real life. Properly.
I think it's those Venn diagrams of life that every so often you orbit differently, and then you intersect. So today's an intersection.
It's great.
Yeah.
Because I sometimes interview people from the UK in the UK because it's just convenient.
Okay.
And here we have you with your London accent, but we're in Dublin recording our chat today.
Yeah.
So we've got so many places to go here. I'm going to begin with your name, Sumi. It's a beautiful name. I'd love to know what it means or where it came from, or give me the provenance of it.
It's not my full name. My actual name is Mousumi, Mousumi. My mother actually misspelt it, so it's meant to have an H in it, so Moushumi. So she misspelt it. I was then, if you think of every kind of bastardization around Mousumi, mouse, Susie, this and that, Mosey, mushroom, all of it came out.
You've heard them all.
I've heard them all. And I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to do about it. So when I did have a say, and that say kind of came in secondary school, I just thought, end of, let's just keep this simple. Okay, I'm no longer Mousumi, I'm Sumi.
Yes.
It drove my mother absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't my government name. And the Indians have this reference point of referring to you by your government name.
Your government name? I haven't heard of that before.
It's a real kind of like, if you've ever lived, I suppose, in a country like my parents did, they were immigrants to the United Kingdom, you're very careful around your passport and your papers. So you have your home name, but you have your government name that's issued to you that you have to put on all documentation. And my parents lived through change. My father was born in Burma, came into India without papers. So he needed a government name to establish himself. My mother went to nursing school. She needed a government name.
Yeah.
So
these were roots.
Yeah, they were their kind of, let's say, drawdown to who they were. And so my mother gave me this government name. I happened to be born in the monsoon season. Mousumi is from the rain, or as she said to me, it's absolutely mad temper. So, you can take your pick on that.
Isn't that so it means from the rain?
It means from the rain. It's from the monsoon
season.
And that's when I was born. I was born in, born in December, but that would have been the monsoon season back in the day.
I don't mean to be rude. I'm trying to figure out, was that a compliment as a name, or was it born out of frustration?
I don't know. There were certain things my mother did which were really quite unique to herself. And it's only now in latter years when you kind of do that look back. Yeah. And now that she's not with me, that I'm kind of saying, kind of makes sense. But at the time you're kind of going, where the hell are you getting this from? Because I want to be Jennifer.
Yeah.
I really want to be Jennifer.
You weren't having that.
No, she wasn't having any of that.
Were you born in...
No, I was born in London. I was born in North London.
That's why you wanted to be Jennifer?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to be Jennifer.
And what part of North London?
So I was born in Enfield. And Enfield is a suburb of North London. Yeah. It is on the cusp of the Hertfordshire countryside.
Yes.
And it's also a town. So it's that kind of semi-rural but yet town feel. And it's not what it is today. I mean, if you go back today, it's really very, very urban. But when my parents moved there, and it was a really interesting choice because my father in particular chose not to go and live where other Indian families were congregating.
Big decision,
Huge
as we
decision.
Irish know, we're in Cricklewood and Kilburn and so on. So tell me about that.
So he came to England in the kind of late 50s, early 60s, 59, 60. He was a relatively young man at the time. And then he stayed and he worked. And he lived through the era where there would be boarding houses that would say no blacks, no Irish, no browns, no dogs. You know, he was in that era. And he literally had to work hand to mouth. His tragedy was that he never finished education.
Yeah.
And that was due to the death of his dad at quite a, seminal age. So he never had that chance to kind of go over any kind of glass ceiling of salary.
It's a theme. It's a theme in this show and in people's lives where the father or mother or someone died and they have to, it's all hands on deck.
Totally.
And these young minds that were waiting to be expanded and educated and turned into something different, suddenly the fork in the road is not a fork. It's actually a single prong that says, that's it.
That's it. And that was his way forward. And together with that, he also was put under the burden of provision and duty. And duty is another thing that, immigrants can carry. Indian immigrants can carry that particularly. So his duty was to provide for his mother, who, being an Indian woman of, an older age, would have absolutely no income. And for his sisters, particularly those that weren't married. So anything he earned
in the UK
had to be sent back to India.
The echoes with Irish and Indian history are extraordinary. So he settled in the UK and you had a family with obviously your mother. And how many of you were there, siblings?
Just me.
Oh, you were an only child?
I'm me, singular one. Maybe
she came from the rain.
She came from the rain.
On her own.
Such chaos. That was it. No,
that was it.
So, and then with that, I guess, being their only child, I was their only focus, and my mother fought really hard for education. And she went to nursing school. The premise or the offer of going any higher wasn't there because she didn't have backup, she didn't have support, she didn't have finance. So she wouldn't have ever been able to read medicine. So she went to nursing school and their absolute mantra became, from the earliest of age, education is your exit. Yeah. For my father because he didn't get the chance, and for my mother because she got the chance.
That gives me goosebumps. I just felt, because I believe in education so much and the power of it, but sometimes also the cruelty of the lack of democracy around it too for some and others. We can come to that if we choose later on. But your mother, how would you describe your mum?
Absolutely batshit brown crazy.
What does that mean? Is there a dictionary definition? I've never heard that before.
She was just, eclectic doesn't even go there. She really had some collective individualisms. I mean,
what are you trying to say?
I think what she was so progressive in so many ways, but yet there were trenches of her that were just caught in time. And I have to do a look back. She lost her mother when she was 6 months old.
Oh.
And she was brought up in the most rural part of India. At the end of a train line, and at the end of the train line, her father was a rail worker, and he had to travel into a bigger city, leaving this, young family without a mother to fend for itself. So what happened to her was that her 10-year-old sister then had to raise her, which was a catastrophe of sorts because it meant that any education the sister might have had access to back in the 30s was immediately stopped because a 10-year-old had to then bring up a 6-month-old baby. And my mom, will tell me stories of as she grew up, she kind of saw her sister and said, this is not my life. I am not going to cook and wipe feet and chop vegetables, waiting for the older brother and the father to come back from the railway line.
Yes.
So she literally took herself to the village school, which was under a tree, the bough of a tree, with her older brother, who apparently, hit her around the head that day to say, girls don't get educated, to which my mother was, I am going to be able to read. So she fought her way to school. And then she fought her way to nursing school. Her father didn't want to finance it. As I said, there wasn't money to offer anything else. Yeah. So she left rural India to come to Calcutta to go to nursing school. And it was the end of the Raj, but we still had very British isms within the hospital structure. So there was matron, and matron got the white coat ready every day for the consultants, ironed it. And the lowest ranking nurse had to fill the fountain pen for the consultant.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and carry the tray.
Passage to India.
So I think that was her legacy. And with that came that legacy of you're not going to have to fight as hard to be educated because I fought so hard. So therefore, I'm going to tell you, your way out of everything is going to be through education.
I'm trying to figure out, was your mum a little difficult when you were growing up, or was she the opposite?
Absolutely. No, she was a pain in the ass.
Okay. So she was. Was she putting pressure on you? Is that what it was? And saying, you do not have a choice. So you might say, do you know what I'd love to be as a botanist? And she was saying, no.
No, emotionally, you are either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's it. There are your career. Yeah, okay. There are your career choices.
Did you fight back?
Oh, absolutely. Totally. I mean, she would follow that up with, better is Hindi for darling. Better, if there's 24 hours in the day, you need to be studying 27. You're kind of going, seriously?
Okay.
Seriously, are you really saying that out loud?
This is tiger parenting in the extreme.
Tiger parenting, but restrictive in a way in that, there wasn't out-of-school activities. The only out-of-school activities that was offered was music because it augmented, brain development, and swimming because she didn't want me to die. So
she's good like that, wasn't she? It's really nice to have an uptick in the conversation about your mother.
Totally, yeah. You need to be able to swim because somebody needs to be able to mind me when I get older. So they were my only two outlets. So I totally just kind of went, what the absolute something has to give. But what she did let me do is that she let me go to the library. She had absolutely no problems because in her world, that was education. That came into if there's 24 hours of the day, you need to be studying 27. And she was under the guise that if I went to the library, of course, I'd be reading really, really clever books.
Yeah. And now we get to the point of some of this podcast, which is what you were reading. So what book are you picking for your childhood book, Sumi?
My very first, I wasn't really taken by anything, in your younger years, where they kind of put you towards Roger Redhat or Dr. Seuss or anything. None of that got me.
Yep.
They were just words. There wasn't a story. So, looking through these shelves, and I do remember it, and they were slightly fusty. There was a book that started with the word Black Hearts, and I just thought, it's a little bit dark. I like dark. And I was about 8, and I learnt to read quite early. I was reading, by the age of 5 or 6. So I pulled it out, and it was a book that said Black Hearts in Battersea. And then all of a sudden, you open it, and there's actually a story.
Yeah.
There's something to actually follow.
Tell us the story, really.
So the story of Black Hearts in Battersea starts with this guy called Simon, and Simon is looking for a guy. He's looking for a doctor who is his mentor, and he can't find him. So he's in England, and he's looking, and he knocks on the door of this house, and this really quite grumpy pair open the door. But with the grumpy pair is this real raggle-taggle, little snot-nosed, little geeky girl called Dido.
Yeah.
And Dido has a trail of snot, which was me. Dido is me. I mean, she's snot-nosed and her life is miserable. Yeah. Well, in context, my life was miserable. I had to study 27 hours a day. And Dido's life was friggin' miserable. And Simon is they're getting to know each other. But the background is slightly historical. There's a fictional king on the throne. But if you put it together, it's probably around the time of Queen Victoria's era. But it gives you that kind of depth and that dive into dark passages of London. And you can suddenly smell the sewage.
Yeah.
But then throw in, he's suddenly getting into hot air balloons and he's trying to stop someone blowing up the king. But with that, as, Simon's character evolves, Simon's also a painter.
Yeah.
And he's a little bit geeky and he's floppy haired. And I'm 8 or 9, I'm kind of going, I really like Simon. Mm. And, at 8 or 9, you're kind of going, I would like to meet a Simon. Do you know? And was that my first kind of crush?
Yeah.
Probably.
Sounds like it.
Probably, yeah.
He was a person of interest.
He was a person of interest. And that kind of left me a lifelong crush on the name Simon. And it kind of became really Pavlovian. And if you were called Simon, therefore I was interested in you.
Wow. so isn't that there's an amount of Simons around the land going, this could be my moment. Let's keep going. Let's not encourage all the Simons because, there's a lot of weirdos out there on Instagram.
And then Duran Duran came along.
Well, look at you. Yeah. We'll get to what happened in your life in a moment. But back to younger you.
Yeah.
You described your mother in wonderful terms. Your dad, meanwhile, I just want to briefly talk about him because I get the sense that if your mum's going to be that larger than life character, your dad was probably a lower key sort of gentleman. Is that right, or did he match her?
They were quite disparate, in personality. And I think the tragedy is that they probably stayed together longer than they should.
Okay.
And it was cultural, and it was also what was expected, living under the same roof, but two quite separate lives.
I see, okay.
But he was a very gentle soul.
Yeah.
He truly, and that, draw or that wish to learn more never left him. So he would read anything.
See where that comes from.
Yeah,
okay.
and
for joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But even just to learn. So he wasn't particularly sporting, but yet would devour the sporting pages of a newspaper so that he could hold his own in a conversation. Not necessarily understanding it, because if you turned on the TV, he wouldn't be watching sports. So he wasn't a watcher of rugby or cricket or any of that. But he would read about it. Yeah. And the Sunday newspapers, he'd buy one newspaper per week. It would be the Sunday newspapers. And he would spend the whole week.
They'd last.
Yeah. And literally almost treasuring it, saving it, and learning from it through the week. And then again on a Sunday, another paper would be bought. And that was my childhood with him around that.
I love that. And was India a big part of your childhood? Or was it a sense of, we're here now, that was there, that was then, let's get on with the next bit?
It was and it wasn't. It was very much so in that, my parents as immigrants, the only holiday we had was going back to India.
Yeah.
So they saved every 2 years. Every spare bit of money was saved, and every 2 years.
And you went back as a family?
We went back as a family.
What was that like for London, Sumi? To be going back to the homeland? When
I was younger, I didn't like it.
Yeah. Because?
I didn't like it because it was not familiar. It was uncertain, access to, a great phrase my mother would have always said to me. And again, it's the appreciation. Better, if you turn on the tap, you can drink the water. And she would say that without fail every time she turned on the tap.
Yeah.
When you turn on the tap, you can drink the water. And we suddenly went to India. And you couldn't turn on the tap. There was this whole rigmarole of getting the water from the well, boiling the water, letting the water cool down. Yeah. There may not necessarily have been a fridge where we were staying. If we took gifts out for the relatives, be it chocolate or sweets, they all melted. Yeah. Or they were hung in a net basket and hung from the ceiling because the ants would climb up. So there was this whole rigmarole of that, you bought stuff out, but you weren't allowed to eat it because it was for the people you bought it out. And they would spend 2 years saving up, and there would be the suitcase of gifts. So there were things that went into the suitcase that you weren't allowed to touch. You got a big slap on the wrist.
The suitcase was accumulating over the 2 years.
Over the 2 years of gifts. Amazing. And, my mother and father would buy items and check the labels on clothes to make sure it said made in England, because that's what people wanted or expected from my parents. So no, I didn't enjoy it until I got older going to India. And then it became Calcutta was the best party city you could go to.
So what age are we at this point?
We are about 17, 18.
Now.
My parents are allowing me to go to India on my own.
Yeah.
I've two equally, let's say, boisterous cousins.
Yeah.
I have another cousin that's flying in from New York. So New York cousin Mimi, Calcutta cousin Choto, and myself from London.
Yeah.
It was 3 girls on tour in downtown Calcutta.
Wow.
And
you blew the doors off the place, yeah.
That was when fun really, really started.
Yes.
And there were fabulous places called the Pink Elephant and the Oberoi Grand. And
these are all sort of
clubs and the underground scene. And because my cousin in Calcutta knew these places, she'd go, to her mother, yeah, we're just going to get ice cream. Fuck me, are we going to get ice cream?
And it was off.
It was off.
And what were we drinking or doing? Or
hard spirits. India, in teen years, we're not a country of wine. So it was always going to be liquor. It was always going to be hard spirits. Yeah. And, we would fall through the door and, absolutely just a little bit of drink, not much. And, of course, the answer, how are we ever going to get them married? And telegrams going to London, telegrams going to New York. So
wow, they're out of control.
What are we going to do with them?
Wow.
Yeah. So I had a good few years where Calcutta, going from being what a pain in the ass to being cannot get enough of it.
I think that's one of the greatest swerves I've heard on this programme from... The tap water wouldn't come out too. Shots.
Totally.
Wow. Okay, so we have you now into your teens, and maybe we'll head to college with you shortly, and you're going to study medicine. And And but I suppose I would like to get to the next book as well, as there are 3. So we'll go with the book that changed your life at this point. I think it makes sense, seeing as you've kind of described the colour and the intensity of Calcutta as an adult as somewhere very, to me it sounds exotic and quite fun and borderline insane for all the right reasons. So let's get to your life change. You're still reading at this point, are you?
I'm still reading. Yeah. I kept reading the whole way through.
Great.
There was probably a hiatus when I went into medical school for a period of time, and that was just time management. But no, I still read the whole time, and I was almost easily identified. Besides being brown, there was always some sort of dog-eared book next to me. Do you know, the whole time? I like
that. That's a good look. So the book that changed your life. Where are we going for that?
The book that changed my life. It's a book by an author, quite a well-known Indian author called Rohinton Mistry, and the book is called A Fine Balance. And it's a book that's kind of set, it doesn't give a set era, but if I map it back, it was around the time of the state of emergency in India, which would have been mid-70s, late 70s. And it gives an unidentified female prime minister, which would fit in with Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
And it tells a story of 4 people that come together with different circumstance. So you've got this very refined lady, Dina. And then you've got 2 tailors, an uncle and a nephew, Ishvar and Om. And then you've got this young protagonist that's coming for a job that's involved in education, a guy called Manik. And they're all very different, and they have different backgrounds. So Dina's refined. Then you've got these 2 tailors who haven't got access to education. And then you've got Manik that's coming to this unnamed city. But it comes very clear that the city is Mumbai, it's the city by the sea. And again, it just brings you back to, how they describe the architecture and the gulls flying over the bay, but yet the indolent decay. And there's a smell in India, and anyone that if you talk to about India, they will tell you about this kind of indolent decay that's always there in the background.
Yes.
But my parents or uncles or anyone would identify that as home. Yeah. But we weren't elegant at that time in India. So here am I kind of hearing on one side from my parents how fabulous India is. And, that's what they aspire to go back to in their latter years. But this book tells a very different story. And history tells us a very different story. We weren't at our finest in that state of emergency. It was totalitarian power. Mm-hmm. There were no elections. Prime Minister ruled by absolute decree. Access to healthcare was limited. Her son, Sanjay, brought in forced sterilisation to those of a lower subclass. The incentive being a small amount of money, but the results being catastrophic.
Is it the caste system? Is it
within the caste system. And the caste system was still prevalent there, even though Indira Gandhi was seminal in trying to remove the caste system.
Interesting, yeah.
But yet she ruled through that period of time with absolute decree. So that book is kind of set in that time.
It sounds fascinating.
And it tells the story of those 4 people. And there isn't much joy in that book. You get pockets, you get snippets of humour.
Yes.
The 2 boys, the nephew and the uncle, they suddenly decide, we don't need a pair of testicles, but we do need money to eat, and the story along the way of how they do that. And then they suddenly realise, hold on a minute, is that propaganda? Are they targeting us because we're poor and we're uneducated?
Yes.
And then they get to the clinic and they say, no, this isn't worth, tea and biscuits. I need to literally hold on to my balls, forgive the metaphor for that. But it's too late. They literally they're knocked out with horrific results.
Yeah.
And then you've got this phenomenal woman, Dina, who by change of circumstance has to reinvent herself.
Yes.
And she's kind of yearning for a life that's gone. And you can see her refinement. You can feel her beauty, and you can read about her elegance, how she draped her sari.
And is it kind of withering on the vine? Is that what's happening?
No, she's still in the prime.
She's still there, okay.
She's still in her
prime. But she's longing for...
She's longing for a life through circumstance. She becomes widowed.
Oh, I see.
And so her identity is gone. As, again, a lot of women could identify with...
Attached to the male...
Yeah, attached to the male, and that her source of income, her source of who she is, her surname, her place.
All tied up.
All tied up with that. And her in-laws are a little bit resentful that she's in that house. When Indian women marry, you go and live with your in-laws. And she then has to become their unpaid kind of like, say, house help.
Yes.
But she's exquisite.
Well, that's definitely going on my list. I think that'd be no, but it just sounds so interesting. So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Well, she's one of my favourites. She's a Canadian author called Louise Penny. The Grey Wolf is the 19th in the Armand Gamache series. If you want a series in your life of books that never fail to impress or move, it's beautiful writing. The stories are all based in a fictional village of Three Pines in Canada. The central character is Detective Armand Gamache, a lovely man, happily married, but troubled. Always trouble around the place somewhere, in his heart, in his head, in his life. But in the village, there's always something shaking. So it could be a murder, it could be a mugging, it could be a kidnapping. But they're written with great passion, great class, and they never disappoint. I always find if I'm really busy, I reach for a Louise Penny book. So this one, the 19th, go for it. If I were you, I'd start at the beginning if you haven't read them before. But in the meantime, if you're a Louise Penny fan, here it is, The Grey Wolf, number 19. Keep going. It's great stuff. Now back to the show. Let's bring you Sumi Dunne. Let's bring you to university. You decided medicine. Your mother said at the beginning of this chat it was going to be law or medicine.
Yeah, it was, emotionally too, it's law or medicine.
Yeah.
And you're kind of going, seriously, law or medicine? I can swim now, but I can't swim across the channel, so I'm kind of stuck with you. Tethered to you. So that part of act of rebellion, I did A-levels, which is, O-levels, A-levels in school. And I absolutely bombed my first set of A-levels. It was my first real palpable sense of rebellion, kind of, I don't really want to study. I could have. I chose not to. Gosh. So I didn't get the grades that I was meant to get or I was predicted to get, which just caused absolute fallout.
That was being a brat, was it?
Oh, it was total, absolute privilege.
You're acting up,
little brat.
Yeah, I'm kind of on your mum's side in that one. What do I know? I was never a rebellious teenage girl.
Were you?
And that came later in life.
You've never been exposed to teenage rebellious girls?
Moving on to your story. So you rebelled at that point.
I rebelled at that point. So I didn't get the grades that I was meant to get. So I was given the opportunity to resit my A-levels. And my parents put together all the money they had. So I resat the exams and I got the grades as I was meant to get. It was kind of like light bulb moment. If I want to leave Enfield,
this was the ticket.
This was the ticket.
Yeah. So acting up. It's only self-destructive and self-defeating. Okay.
Totally. And I'm going to be a little bit more discerning in my, university application, which is the furthest university I can get from Enfield. But she's not going to turn up at the doorstep.
Wow. That's amazing. So she can't go.
She can't go knock at the door.
I love that. So you chose to study in
Southampton.
Okay.
And I liked the sound of Southampton. I don't know. And it was about an hour and a half on the train. It got me away from Enfield. It meant that I didn't have to live at home. But what it did mean is that because I did my A-levels in December, I wasn't able to apply for university for medicine. So I could only go for a science course. Right. So I actually went and read for a degree in physiology and pharmacology first in Southampton. And then at the end of that, I read medicine in Southampton as a graduate student.
So you got there.
Yeah, I got there.
And then you became a doctor.
I became a doctor.
Did you ever have a desire to go into one of the fields, psychiatry or dermatology or whatever it might
absolutely. It became really apparent through med school. There's certain things that, put you off. Smell was a big thing for me. So there was absolutely no way that I could do, let's say, lower gastrointestinal surgery. Right. That was ruled out.
What I thought smell was going to preclude you from a lot of medicine.
So smell was a bit, let's say, visceral for me.
Suddenly I'm thinking, shouldn't she have picked the law a bit?
But I like kids. There was just something about kids. And
so paediatrics was calling.
Paediatrics was the thing. And there was this absolutely hot registrar called Simon.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Full circle. Oh, you did. That was great.
Yeah.
What an arc.
So it's kind of like, right, Simon's on that ward. I am most definitely going to turn up every morning at 6:00 to see the little babbas. But he also had a really wicked sense of humour.
Okay, good.
And I remember being on this ward round with him, and he was awfully British. And he wore a bow tie. And there was a consultant, there was myself and a few members of the team. And we came to this crying baby. And absolutely nothing was going to sort this crying baby out. And the consultant kind of said, well, somebody for heaven's sake, just put a dummy in its mouth. To which Simon just went, no. He said, it's not a Tory MP, you know.
Oh, that's great. Oh, my God. You were infatuated by Simon.
But it was though.
I just like, you were just so in love with Simon.
Totally.
Did you ever...
Did I ever? No.
No, I'd go for coffee with Simon, is what I was going to say.
I didn't go for coffee with Simon. But I absolutely, totally fell in love with paediatrics.
Oh, sorry. I thought Simon was going to finish that sentence.
There probably was a little bit of that, but he was having none of it.
But paediatrics was your thing, obviously.
Paediatrics was my thing. And I actually did train in paediatrics.
Yeah.
So I then, as I finished medical school, knew that was what I wanted to do.
When you came on the scene in Ireland, your name was striking because Sumi was something, S-U-M-I, okay, that's fine. But the second thing that was striking as well was just that you were Sumi Dunne.
Yeah.
And clearly, I mean...
There's a disconnect.
Right. So take us to how you met Mr. Dunne and how that all happened and the Irish connection.
So coming back to Calcutta and the Wild Women... I was in medical school and there was a wedding on back in India. And I flew out because my parents couldn't fly out. And then my cousin from New York, her parents couldn't fly out.
Yeah.
And then Cho was like, the girls are back on tour. Here we go. And Cho's older sister was getting married. And this was quite an important marriage, almost like an alliance of two medical dynasties.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah. And, you know, and there was political manoeuvring and shenanigans. And prior to the wedding ceremony lead up, there was lots of meetings. But what didn't help lots of meetings were 3 19-year-olds rocking in, absolutely drunk.
Yeah, okay, well.
We would rock up and the aunts would be, Betta, what are you going to do? There's a big wedding, important wedding, and look at you,
You're a mess.
You're an absolute mess. And then it really didn't help that I then met one of the musicians of the wedding who had bright blue eyes, called Humayun, not Simon. Simon, maybe? Anyway, and was last seen, hanging out with Humayun. And then it was like... more telegrams to London. She's hanging out with a musician, called Humayun. What are we going to do? The wedding. And then another one had disappeared with someone else. And it was like, her marriage is in a year. What are we going to do? This is the marriage. These are the girls. So they put us on a plane and they shoved us off to Kathmandu to get rid of us.
Did they? They did. So you were exiled to Kathmandu?
We were exiled.
Have you been...
The 3 girls were literally, we woke up one morning and there was a bevy of aunts and they were all wag finger, sari thrown over their shoulder.
So it was like the scene out of Superman 2, you're all sent in that little glass frame going, no, and then down through into Kathmandu.
And then they were kind of going, you falling out nightclubs, what is the family going to do?
Wow.
So they said, we've spoken to your mother. And it was like, dear God, we've spoken to your aunt. And it was like, okay. And we have decided that the 3 of you, not in Calcutta, we need to get the wedding over the line. You're going to Kathmandu for 4 days. So we went to Kathmandu and there's only one place in Kathmandu that you can get liquor. So we rocked into this place and it was called the Yak and Yeti. And there was a Beatles tribute band playing that was absolutely awful.
Yeah.
And then kind of this white smoke appeared and this really rather tall person appeared with a beard and tracksuit bottoms and went, how are you? And I, the 3 of us...
Classic Irish entrance in Kathmandu,
yeah. How are you? And then... do you fancy a drink? Now you're talking. Right now.
You have my attention. He knew the way to your heart.
Yeah, totally. So, and then we went upstairs and it was a park casino upstairs, but I card count. So it's just something that I've been able to do over the years. So they were playing blackjack. And they weren't particularly bright in, shuffling the cards. And they were only using 3 packs. So it's quite easy with the law of probability.
But it is if you're a Rain Man. That is the most bizarre skill.
So anyway, don't play cards with me ever, right? I cheat wildly. Okay, open disclosure.
Just learning so much.
So this rather tall Howier was playing blackjack. And I just kept... Am I stereotyping here? And I just said, no, don't put down the card. Don't put it down. Oh. Hold. and they just said, just take my word for it. So he collated quite, he won against the house, which was quite unheard of that night.
This is like the most unlikely James Bond, like Seamus Bond scene where this fella's in the tracksuit with the beard at the table going, about to lose everything when the Bond girl comes in and says, hold the card, Mr. Bond. And he's going, grand, I will, so see what happens.
Yeah, it's just a bit and, what are you going to do?
This is a great origin story for your relationship, I have to say. It's really good. I don't think I've heard one quite as good as this.
And then, the night went on and the liquor went on and then, frontal lobe gets shot to pieces so the filter goes off, and he goes to cash in the chips and whatever and then just turns round and says, if I give you $1 million, will you go to bed with me?
What?
And I, at this point, kind of senses kicked in and I just said, would you ever fuck off? I've seen the movie. And that was the beginning of the conversation.
So he gave you $1 million.
Hey, obviously. We can come back to that another day.
And that was
the start.
What's his name?
His name's Matt.
That was Matt Dunne.
Yes, Matt Dunne.
What was he doing in Kathmandu?
He had gone off trekking himself.
Okay, he was on tour.
Yeah, he was on tour himself. He'd gone off trekking, and again, similarly, had heard there's only one place to get hard liquor, and that's in the Yeti. So we kind of hung out for the remainder. We were there for 4 days to get the wedding over the line. So that was night one. And then the two of us hung out because we kind of realised that we could beat the house. And we went back and we played cards.
Bonnie and Clyde.
And at the end of it, this is no mobile phone era. He was smoking at the time. He wrote my number, a landline number, down on his pack of cigarettes and said, I'll ring you.
Yeah.
To which the two cousins
burst out laughing.
And they just went, yeah, right. I stayed on in India. We came back for the wedding celebrations. I got my heart broken by the musician, Kel Surprise.
Yeah.
And rocked back into England, to which, my mother was, Betta, what are you doing? I sent you to India and now some man ringing you and I don't understand him. What are you doing?
He's been ringing the landline.
He's been ringing the landline, kind of. I sent you to India for purpose and now you have man. You're a naughty boy, kind of.
Did your mum meet Matt in the end?
She did, yeah.
And did it go okay?
The first time he came to the door, we'd been dating for a while. And, like everyone, when you just want to hold things just a little bit
steady. Quietly
so that it's your own space for a while before the whole world knows about things. I think we've all been in that space.
Of course.
But he kind of said, right, I'll meet your mother. I've heard a lot about her. And he knocked at the door and she kind of looked at him. She was a rather small lady, very petite lady. And she just looked at him and she went, you, hanky-panky, me, heart attack.
What an entree.
That was her first words to him. And as I went out the door that day, she gave me, those umbrellas where you press the button and it goes pop up. And she goes, naughty boy. If he's a naughty boy, you just, naughty boy.
Use that as a shield.
Yeah, as in, So that was her first introduction. But she really liked him.
Yeah,
and the reason she liked him was it came back really as it evolved. Phenomenal family. I have no siblings. And I suddenly, over a period of time, acquired 5 sister-in-laws.
Yeah.
5 sisters.
And she loved that and you loved that.
She loved that. I loved that. And then she had that little bit of naiveness. He's Catholic, so he can't have sex. Do you know?
Oh.
And she lived in that little bubble.
Yes. Catman don't.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen anyway.
No. So she just lived in that little bubble, but they got on really, really well. Yeah.
I suppose we should mention a book.
Is that why we're here?
I feel like I've read a book today. You're just amazing. The stories and time is running away. So this feels terrible. Let's go for we won't spend too long on it because I feel like that last book you just read out, your OG story, like I say. We're going to talk about the book that brings you joy. Let's touch on that briefly.
Oh my God, there's only one book.
Which is that?
Rosie is my relative. I found Rosie is my relative. I found the book in this dead-end bookshop when I was doing one of my junior house jobs. So, the hours were long. There was no European Working Time Directive. I didn't have a mobile phone. And I chose to work down in the south coast of England.
Yes.
So my junior house jobs were in Winchester, gorgeous city, and then down in Poole. And the hospital is behind sandbanks. And there are the most wonderful, tiny little places that sell books. And this was a dog-eared book. And I always liked Gerald Durrell. I had read quite a bit of Gerald
My
Durrell.
Family and Other Animals.
Yeah.
People are familiar with the books and the TV series.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and his wonderful descriptions, you know, watch it, the Strawberry Pink Villa and, you know, the Lemon Ice Villa. You know, you always wanted to live in one of those houses.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Mother was always a little bit batshit crazy, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So
you were relating to a lot of this.
I was totally taking a lot of this. So, dog-eared book, Rosie's my relative, Gerald Durrell. And on the back cover it said, "This is semi-true." I'm like, well, that's interesting because most of what he's written was always an autobiography. So you open the book and it tells you this guy called Adrian. And Adrian's just, you know, a bit pissed off with life. And Adrian gets a letter out of the blue from cranky old uncle and says, you know, dear Adrian, you're basically a waster. I'm going to leave you €500. But you've got to look after Rosie. And by the way, Rosie can be a bit difficult. Here's €500. And knowing the uncle as he did, he kind of expected some disgruntled lover or, you know, some, I don't know, some ex-wife or whatever. And he went, I need the £500, £500.
Sure.
I'm going to go and find Rosie. So he rocks in to find Rosie. It takes him, it's a bit of a story to get to Rosie. And he goes in and Rosie is an elephant. And Rosie is not only an elephant, Rosie has a drink problem. Rosie is drawn to liquor. And she was in the circus, and the only way to keep her quiet was to feed her gallons of cherry brandy, liquor. So Rosie just doesn't give a hoot. She's perpetually on the hunt for liquor.
Yes.
And she's just a little bit drunk throughout the whole story.
This is wonderfully peculiar.
Wonderfully peculiar. And Adrian's kind of going, what am I going to do with this like drunk elephant? I've got to bring her from point A to point B. And it's the story of the scrapes they get up to.
Great.
But in between this, like Rosie goes missing. I mean, how do you lose like, you know,
a drunk elephant?
A drunk elephant.
Yeah.
But she does, because she's gone on the hunt for liquor. And then if she likes you, she wraps her trunk around you and lifts you up in the air. And it's not very elegant if you're Lady Feather Whistle or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
And then it all culminates as only, you know, people of a certain era write in a quite a funny, kind of manic court scene where most of Southwest England are having a go at Adrian and Rosie because they've caused more than destruction and chaos. And, you know, they're in court and people are roaring and then Rosie comes thundering in. But it's just that
That's wonderful.
bellyache chuckle.
Oh, I love that. What joy. I can see why you picked that.
Yeah, it's just, and there's no bad words and there's no death and there's no nastiness and there's no...
It's joy.
Yeah.
It's joy.
It's funny.
Rosie is My Relative by Gerald Durrell. It's Sumi Dunne's book that brings her joy. And now we conclude with the it's the name of the autobiography you have yet to write. But just before we get to the title that you've chosen, because I feel we've left out a whole chunk, but unfortunately the podcast isn't 4 hours long. And what I wanted to ask you was, no, really, this could be like a marathon. But you've just described this really exotic mixture of, you know, London but also Calcutta and then on to Kathmandu. And so on and so forth. And you met the love of your life and you come home to Laois. And which is in, what'd you say, the Midlands, middle of Ireland-ish?
It is. It's the Midlands.
Just to describe for people who mightn't be familiar with that part
it's
of
the Midlands. So
not a city. It's not a...
No, it's not a city.
It's a town,
and then
really,
and within Laois, I'm based in quite a rural area.
Yeah. And how old are your children?
My children now are 21, 19,
right,
17, and 11.
Okay, so that's quite a sweep. Quite
a sweep of them. And they've been born and they've been brought up in County Laois.
The move, the contrast from the life you described pre-Laois and then landing in Laois, it sounds like that must have been an enormous leap. And I'm just curious as to how you adjusted and settled.
It was an interesting, I have to say, interesting navigation because, you know, you first come here on that kind of upswing of romance. So it's all very rosy and it's all very oxytocin driven.
Yeah, the good life, like the old TV show.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there was, you know, for me, a red line. It was before I came here permanently, I had to have paid employment. Okay. So that was, you know, the absolute. So there was 8 years of commuting before I actually moved here.
London to Laois.
London to Laois.
Yeah.
And until I got paid employment here, that wasn't going to happen. So when I did end up with my first job here, it was with paediatrics in Mullingar. Mm-hmm. That was kind of, okay, so now I'll move. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's difficult to get a pint of milk. You know, I'm so used to going out of the door and going down the road and getting a pint of milk. You actually have to drive somewhere. There was no other way to get to work but to drive. There's no public transport.
Yes.
There's no overground train. There's no underground train. There's no bus system. You are driving through the back bog. The roads at times weren't the easiest,
Yes.
particularly when the weather got bad. But you did that. And you're suddenly saying, okay, there has to be a reason why I'm here. Do I like it enough to stay here? And I did, because there was a warmth that came from this kind of very rural living. And everybody, knows you. I've suddenly 5 sisters that I never had in my entire life, and with that, 5 phenomenal women that could just literally say, okay, get a grip, get in the car and drive, stop moaning. We did that, for us to go to work. And yeah, it's absolute. Yes, if a goat eats your underwear off the washing line, it's happened to us,
Gerald Jarrell would love that.
Yeah, get on with it kind of thing. And yes, I liked it.
Yeah.
I found it difficult. I can't say that I found it easy to begin with. But as with anything, you adapt.
Adapt, adjust, and...
Yeah, and then, there's a little bit of planning that has to come into place around that.
So you plan getaways to obscure cities with the girls and the women or whatever the hell it is. And,
totally. And then I was, really rewarded through parts of training to be asked to interview for a lecturer's post with the College of Surgeons, which, it's a microcosm of a city within a city.
Yes.
When you walk through the doors of the college, it's just a phenomenal place.
That's important to you, the communication side of things and the teaching side of things. You came to the public attention in Ireland as one of the not participants, I should say, one of the experts is the right word, in Operation Transformation. And as we draw to a close our conversation today, I have to say that you're a hidden asset. Because the perception, we talked about perception a lot in this conversation today. The perception I had of you was, just a straight talking, quite kind of mild mannered, kind of low key. In fact, everything I thought of you was wrong. You're the very opposite of all of these things. So we need to see more of this version of you. I mean, if I was commissioning editor of a TV show, I'd say, where did you keep her hidden? What are you going to call the book? The autobiography you've yet to write?
The autobiography I've yet to write. Well, it'd have to be From London to Laois.
From London to Laois.
Yeah.
Lovely alliteration.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. And we could do this interview. We could have you back in a few years' time. I'd say we'd have more stories to tell. But for now, it's been total revelation.
Thank you very much.
A real pleasure to talk to you. You're a great storyteller.
Oh.
I don't know whether whether it's your dad reading the papers or your mum just giving you material, but you've conveyed it all well. And thanks for your time today.
Not at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sumi. And there you have it, another packed episode with some great book recommendations for you to enjoy, all brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. So shop in your local Eason store or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.